ਟਾਈਮ ਟਾਕ 'ਚ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਅੱਜ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਦੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਕੁਝ ਪੈਨਲਿਸਟ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰ ਤੋਂ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਆ। ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦਰਦ ਹਲੇ ਉਹ ਭੁੱਲਿਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰ ਦਾ। ਕੀ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਹੈ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜ਼ੁਬਾਨੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਸੁਣਾਂਗੇ। ਸਾਡੇ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਗੈਸਟ ਹੈ ਟੌਮ ਕੁਗਿਨ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਫਾਰਮਰ ਇੰਟੈਲੀਜੈਂਸ ਆਫਿਸਰ ਹੈ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਬੋਸਨੀਆ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਸਰਵ ਕੀਤਾ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਵਾਰ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਮਸ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਕੰਮ ਕੀਤਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ। ਦੂਜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਗੈਸਟ ਹੈ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਬਿਕਰਮ ਲਾਂਬਾ। कौन नहीं जानता डॉक्टर बिक्रम लांबा ਨੂੰ। ਡਾਕਟਰ ਬਿਕਰਮ ਲਾਂਬਾ ਇੱਕ ਰਾਈਟਰ ਹੈ, ਬ੍ਰੌਡਕਾਸਟਰ ਹੈ, ਇੱਕ ਕਮੈਂਟੇਟਰ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹਿਊਮਨ ਐਨਸਾਈਕਲੋਪੀਡੀਆ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ। ਸਾਡੇ ਅਗਲੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਗੈਸਟ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਹੈ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਭੂਸ਼ਣ ਭੱਟ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰ ਦੇ ਨੇਟਿਵ ਹੈ, ਵੈਲੀ 'ਚ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਲ ਰਹੇ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਇਨਸੀਡੈਂਟਸ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਸੀ, ਦਰਦਨਾਕ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਘਟਨਾਵਾਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਸੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਉਹ ਵਿਟਨੈਸ ਹੈ। ਸਾਡੇ ਅਗਲੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਗੈਸਟ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਹੈ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਵਿਜੇ ਸਜ਼ਵਾਲ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰੀ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ। ਕੈਨ ਯੂ ਲੈਟ ਅਸ ਨੋ your views onto this and how you are working with all these Kashmiri organizations for the benefit of Kashmir?
Thank you, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. So I will briefly give a little bit of history in terms of first of all, what the organizations are, and my role as the international coordinator of the three fora, which is the Indo-Canadian Kashmir Forum, Indo-American Kashmir Forum. Indo-Canadian Kashmir Forum is, of course, in Ottawa and Toronto primarily, and in Indo-American Forum is in Washington, D.C. and Dallas, Texas right now, as our leadership lies, and then in Indo-European Kashmir Forum with headquarters in London and in Geneva, Switzerland. As you heard from Ms. Seni, the birth of these organizations took place in 1991 after the events in Kashmir, dealing with our minority, our Kashmiri Pandits. But it's important to recognize that these organizations really are derived from the diaspora that exists in these countries, mainly the organizations, the socio-cultural organizations that were formed in these countries. I can name, for example, in Canada, it's called Kashmiri Overseas Association of Canada. In America, it's called Kashmiri Overseas Association, KOA. In Europe, it's called the European Group for the, for the European Kashmiri Pandits, KPAE, Kashmiri Pandits Association of Europe. So these are what I call as the diaspora organizations, and recognizing that they were all based on essentially pursuing cultural and humanitarian and social affairs, we decided to branch out and create a sort of a sister wings of these organizations, which would be doing the advocacy on behalf of the community. And these are the ICKF, IAKF, and IEKF. So these are the three organizations. And our role was primarily focused on four areas. It's important to understand that. Of course, the first one was that we would carry out the advocacy of the Kashmiri Pandit issues and challenges, and be able to brief the respective governments in Ottawa, London, and Washington, and be able to tell them not only the executive branch, but also the parliamentarians, the civil society, as well as the media, so that the issue of Kashmiri Pandit misfortunes and their ethnic cleansing and other difficulties would be discussed with them.
Mr. Tom, you have a vast experience. You were a former intelligence officer. Can you put some light on what is happening right now across the world and in the special situation in Kashmir? What are your inputs into this?
Well, coming from where I come from, and based on my experiences, my interest in Kashmir began on a Saturday morning in February of 2004. I was working as a civilian intelligence contractor at the time for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and I got a rather unusual phone call from the head of the unit to come into work early on a Saturday morning. What it was a terrorist investigation into Momin Khawaja of Ottawa, Canada. That terrorism investigation, of course, led to London, England, which is where the bomb was intended to go off. That's also where his co-conspirators were. It led to New York City, and needless to say, it led to Pakistan. Momin Khawaja's family is from Pakistan. Most of the co-conspirators had Pakistani connections. And also, discussions throughout the investigation and throughout the arrest and throughout the trial process kept leading us back, of course, to Kashmir kept popping up. And at the time, I didn't quite get the understanding of why Kashmir was important, but it became critically important on July 7th, 2005. The more astute among you will remember that that is the date of the London subway bombings, in which 4 suicide bombers killed 52 people and injured about 750 more. Those individuals and the individuals associated to Momin Khawaja actually used Kashmir as their focal point, their inspiration point. That is what was driving much of their thinking. And particularly, it was interesting to hear one of the co-conspirators say that previously they thought of jihad as being something you did in Afghanistan or Pakistan or perhaps somewhere in Africa. But following their beliefs, following their inspiration, following the ideology that was put to them through the Kashmiri situation, they decided that jihad was something they should do over here, which is to say Ottawa or London or Paris or Berlin or whatever. So it's reasonable from my point of view to say that the problem in Kashmir has poisoned not just Kashmir, not just India and Pakistan, but it spread throughout the international community. So the Islamists who support the Kashmiri position there have spread their poison throughout much of Western Europe and Canada, and it's costing the rest of the world big in terms of loss of life, in terms of money, in terms of hatred within society, et cetera, et cetera. Now, can't get into the whole discussion here, it would take forever, but it should also be noted right now that if you look at Pakistan as a factory of terrorism, if you look at it as a place where much of the ideology for the Islamists is being generated, it's worth noting that Pakistan is a key player in the new axis as well. Pakistan plus Qatar plus Turkey plus Afghanistan equals essentially modern day jihad, modern day terrorism, and that's where most of the problems are going to emanate from. One of the key issues, of course, in that is Kashmir. That Kashmir cannot be removed from that discussion. It's integral to them. So from an Indian point of view, I get the sense that they're very worried about Kashmir in the sense that Kashmir won't be just the loss of Kashmir. Kashmir is going to be used as the staging ground to invade the rest of northern India. And on my last 2 trips to Delhi, of course, that was a discussion with many of the folks there about the future threat. So I won't go on for much longer, but I will say I think the problems that started in Kashmir in 1947 produced the Momin Khawaja case in Ottawa. It produced the case in London, England. It produced the subway bombings, and it will continue to poison relations, and it will continue to poison the minds of the young as they work towards their sort of Kashmiri paradise or whatever it is they think they're going to create there.
Dr. Lamba, if you want to put your views forward, what are your thoughts and what good the Indian government has done, or what are their drawbacks, what they have not done so far and what they should do? So what are your comments into this?
Tom was right to some extent. Let me go back and revert to your earlier question to Tom. He was saying that the Indian government didn't do anything. Let me explain it to you and to my colleagues. It was decided that since India is legally, morally, and constitutionally on the right, we should ignore it. That was decided at the highest factor, and it was ignored. It was taken as an internal issue all the time. It was a mistake, I don't deny it. Secondly, right from the word go, in 1947, when the war started, when the Kabylis came, the tribals came, the Pakistan army came in disguise, US was interested in promoting Pakistan. As a matter of fact, at that time, Jinnah and Noon, Liaquat Ali Khan and Noon, they had already committed to USA that they will sign the agreements with SEATO, which later on became CENTO. And India had refused. So Mr. Owen, the first UN observer, was commissioned by USA to condemn India. So historical perspective was that India said, okay, hell with you, we are not going to bother. Secondly, India said, it's our internal affair. The only problem is about POK. Government of India did one mistake, as I pointed out earlier. When Sheikh Abdullah was arrested in 1953, and Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad was made the Prime Minister, he asked the Prime Minister, Nehru, why don't you remove Article 35A and 370? At that time, the Constituent Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir existed, which later on lapsed. Panditji said, no, we don't want to annoy any part or any branch or subgroup of Muslims. This request was repeated by Mr. Sadiq when he became the Prime Minister, when Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad was removed. At that time, the same thing happened. Despite the note by the advisory committee of the Prime Minister, I signed that. The Prime Minister said, no, I don't want to give a handle to people like Bukhari to exploit the Muslim sentiments. So far, so. Now, coming to your question now addressed to me, that what can Government of India do? A, what Tom has said very correctly, Government of India has to become proactive. But along with the government, what organizations are doing, like you are doing, what Dr. Saswal is doing, that is important. At the same time, our biggest problem is that we look to the NGOs who are diametrically opposed to the Indian ethos. We go to Amnesty International, who are absolutely biased against India. If you look at the Mossad report on Amnesty International, they put India as enemy number one of the democracy in Asia. In Asia, they think India is number one enemy, not China. So look at the, to say contradiction or the paradox. If you look at the report, I don't know about RCMP, but even CIA is all the time saying that India is at the fault. So this problem is there. And then, those organizations, the NGOs now, as per the intelligence reports, they are diametrically opposed to India. They are prejudiced against India. What we need is to build up the platform on a level. And I was very happy when Dr. Saswal was talking about what he did in Geneva. So, A, we have got to build it up. Secondly, our media exposure is too little to be noticed. Let's be very clear. Whatever we do, it's a once shot in a blue moon, and then we forget about it. What we need is a sustained campaign spread all the time. Every week there must be something. Some write-ups, some articles, some symposiums, some seminars. Then, another big thing, we are not attacking the younger generation, the universities, the cultural institutions. Look at what China is doing to the Confucius Institutes. They are spreading into the universities. What are the Indian NGOs or the Government of India doing? Nada, zero. So you need a consistent campaign to arouse a consciousness without depending on the crutches of Amnesty International and things like that. Another point which is to be taken is the government inactivity. The Foreign Office, the Indian External Affairs Ministry, does not have a cell till today pertaining to strategy formulation as far as media relations and propaganda is concerned. We have 15 cells, expert groups in Ministry of External Affairs, and not a single cell for arousing public opinion or modulating public opinion. That is a prime need. And let me tell you one thing. I was talking to Bhushan before we started. The Government of India should at this time amend the original complaint to the UNO. It has not withdrawn as yet. Legally, the complaint is still there. So what they should do is they should say either the complaint be treated as withdrawn and UN group be asked to pack up. The second part is they should amend it and say that that problem is solved. It's no longer a disputed territory. Elections have taken place many times. So people have given their opinion. And the fundamentals of Pakistan demilitarizing it is not being met, especially since Pakistan has given 70,000 kilometers of this area to China, which China is not going to vacate. Now the complaint is basically about illegal occupation of Pakistan of the areas constituting POK, Balistan, Gilgit, Hunza. So let's amend the application and let the diplomatic attack be on that side. Another point which we have not taken, we have a soft border. You have to stop that soft border and say, no, it's an international border. Of course, our area is under their control, but we will not permit this crossover of the people because the people come under the cover of meeting the relations. If you have an absolute barrier that the people can't come, then the influx of the terrorists will stop. And that is a prime need. Now, these are certain action plans which are required. They are required at the government level. Then Home Ministry has to intervene. And our politicians have to be asked to keep their mouth shut. Excuse me for being blunt, but some of our politicians are absolute idiots. The former governor of Meghalaya, for example, day before yesterday, he made a very stupid statement when that recent killing took place. When I was the Lieutenant Governor of Jammu and Kashmir, not a single incident took place, as if the Lieutenant Governor is responsible. And then military should be given an absolute free hand. And what Government of India has done, very sensible, extending the international BSF operation from 50 kilometers to 50 kilometers, should be extended 100% to Jammu and Kashmir. 100% inside Jammu and Kashmir should be under BSF, aided and assisted by the local police. And absolutely, as per law. But army should have the supremacy and full authority without any limitation. Hand it over to army for local control and then tell the people. Now, coupled with that aggressive action, aggressive in the sense, firm action, affirmative action, I'll call it. Affirmative action on one side, diplomatic on the other, and the media on the third. The combination of these three is the only way out.
Just if I may respond very quickly to Dr. Lambda, and this will go to actually answer part of your question. Amnesty International in Canada, as a Canadian operation, has an official who is very senior in that organization. Prior to being at Amnesty International, he was the head of a Muslim Brotherhood front group in Canada for a significant number of years. I'm not going to mention the name because I don't want to get sued again, but it's out there, people know it, etc. And that's just one little example of the much larger problem. In the Canadian government, whether it's Omar Al-Gabra, who's Minister of Transport, who previously said Hezbollah and Hamas are not terrorist groups, whether it's Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, who is the guy to stop bombing ISIS, and the individual who said Canada needs a special immigration program for Muslims and Arabs. The list goes on here in Canada. But certainly in the last 6 or 8 years that I've studied this closely, the Canadian government, and by extension the CBC, which is a state broadcaster in all but name, has taken a complete pro-Islamist stance. So if you say you're a victim and you're an Islamist, well, then you get automatic sympathy. But if you identify yourself as a victim of Islamists, then they just don't want to touch you because of political correctness, because of progressivism, because of Marxism, whatever one chooses to call that force. There is a very strong alliance between the leftists on one hand and the Islamists on the other. Both are collectivists, both are anti-capitalist, both are anti-democracy, both are anti-women's rights, both are very pro-violence. And Hindus, of course, don't really fit into that whole discussion, so they wind up on the short end of the stick. One other quick example just to throw in here. In 2018, a guy by the name of Faisal Hussain wandered down the Danforth Street in Toronto and murdered 2 young girls and wounded, I think it was 12 or 13 other people. His family is Pakistani. He had been back to Pakistan twice, allegedly for training at one point, although that was never clearly understood. Despite the fact they're an incredibly impoverished family, they donated $10,000 Canadian to a mosque in Pakistan for reasons that wasn't clear. But here's the kicker. It is alleged that he learned how to shoot and was radicalized by attending a camp in Pakistan. The Toronto police refused to investigate that. And when they were pushed on the issue, and I want to read this just directly, they said, well, we couldn't investigate the Pakistani allegations because, quote, Pakistan is not a highly advanced technical country, which of course is absolute garbage. Pakistan has a very effective, cell phone network. They have a very effective communications. It's cheaper to own a cell phone in Pakistan than it is in Canada. The excuse given was absolute garbage. The pressure, however, put on the police and put on the government, as we've seen here repeatedly in Canada, is that they didn't want the fact that he was an Islamist to be discussed. It was put out to mental illness. Oh, he was just a poor boy. He suffered from mental illness. The reality is, myself and other members of the family and a couple of journalists have looked at this. There is no indication whatsoever anywhere that that kid ever had a mental illness problem. No drugs, no psychiatrists, no programs, nothing. So the whole narrative was put around the Danforth shooter that it was mental illness, when the reality is all the actual evidence shows he was an Islamist. But again, here in Canada, we don't want to bring that issue up, so we just bury it. So one of the problems that Kashmiris have here in Canada, and I would suggest it's the same in the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, Spain, America, whatever, is you are the victims of Islamist oppression and have been for an extended period of time, and you're just not politically correct enough to make it into the mainstream media. You're the wrong kind of victim.
Mr. Bhushan Bhatt, he was a native of Kashmir. He lived there so many years. He had seen all the turmoil of Kashmir Valley. He had seen that incident of 19th January 1990. So, Mr. Bhushan, what do you have to say onto this? What are your comments on this issue? Is any government has done anything or not? If not, then what they have to do?
Thank you, Dr. Lamba, Tom, and Dr. Sazavan. You made some extremely valid points about the need for aggressive presence in the media about the true story of Kashmir, also about the aggressive diplomatic initiatives, to put it in perspective. And if we go back to the ground, it's equally important that we spread the awareness about the true history of Kashmir. Right now, we are observing 22nd of October as the day of aggression to Pakistan. But how many people know about it? And you may have heard about the massacres of Vandhama, Nadimark. Has anyone known about the massacre of Chandrahama? Does anyone know truly what transpired and how many people were massacred in 1947? Minorities all. In Baramulla siege on 26th of October, thousands of Hindus, Hindus and Sikhs and some Christians, even nuns were raped. This awareness is very important because Pakistan is hiding behind the smoke screen of saying, oh, we know nothing about it. So coming down in history, why I said Chandrahama, because Chandrahama was a village where 21 people died, and it hit me and my family directly. Of course, I was not born then, but my mother's village was Chandrahama, where 3 of her own brothers, and 10 of her first cousins. It was a village of 7 Kashmiri Hindu families. The total number of families in the village was about 200, and all the 7 families were eliminated and the women raped. Now, we don't want to do breastfeeding about these things, but we want to increase the awareness.
Right.
That is very important. And what is happening today, there has been a change in response from 47 to 90 to this day today. 47 was most traumatic and most tragic, because after about 2 or 3 years, people did not have any place to migrate. In 90, people migrated from Srinagar to Jammu and other parts of the country and the world. But that time, most of the people, that is the minorities in Kashmir, lived in the villages. They did not have any place to migrate to. They migrated to Srinagar mostly. But the more traumatic thing about them was that they had to go back to the same village and live with those people who had joined the Pakistani forces to kill them. Now today, when we come to 90, there was more fear in 90, because when Lasakol was massacred, or when there were so many prominent people who were massacred at that time, what happened is that there was no law and order virtually. No FIRs were lodged. And that created tremendous fear among the people. Now today, again, they are reminding us through Nandigram, through other massacres, they are reminding us that you are not wanted. And that is where the situation is slightly different. But again, it has to be the concerted response from the media, from the international media, from everybody to put pressure on Pakistan. And Pakistan, actually, if you recall, in the General Assembly after August 5, 19, when the Article 370 and Article 35 were removed, he said, if you lift the curfew in Kashmir, what's going to happen? There'll be bloodbath. They did not see that bloodbath at all. And that is the desperation of Pakistan. This desperation of Pakistan has to be exposed. Awareness about our rights and our needs to go back with dignity has to be increased. And at the root of the survival of India's democracy and India's pluralism and secularism is the survival of the Kashmiri Pandits, Kashmiri Hindus.
Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you very much. So ਆ ਸੀਗੇ all the Kashmiri scholars ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦਰਦ ਹੈ ਜੋ ਘਟਨਾਵਾਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰ 'ਚ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ, ਸੋ ਉਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਵਰਕ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ 22 ਅਕਤੂਬਰ ਨੂੰ ਐਜ਼ ਅ ਬਲੈਕ ਡੇ ਮਨਾਇਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੀ ਵੈਲੀ ਚੋਂ ਕੱਢੇ ਗਏ ਸੀਗੇ ਔਰ ਕਾਫੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਪਰਟੀਜ਼ ਰਹਿ ਗਈਆਂ, ਘਰ ਰਹਿ ਗਏ, ਸੋ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਸਰਕਾਰਾਂ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੁਣੀ। ਸੋ 22 ਅਕਤੂਬਰ ਨੂੰ ਐਜ਼ ਅ ਬਲੈਕ ਡੇ ਮਨਾਉਂਦੇ। ਉਮੀਦ ਹੈ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਅੱਛਾ ਲੱਗਾ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਫਿਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਗੈਸਟ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਰੂਬਰੂ ਜਲਦ ਹੋਵਾਂਗੇ। ਤਦ ਤੱਕ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਆਪਣਾ।